ready here? Okay, let's begin the Nantucket Conservation Commission meeting for Wednesday, August 6, 2014. A reminder to please turn off your cell phones and take any extra conversations out into the hall. We are making both audio and visual recordings of this meeting, and anybody else who records any or a portion of this meeting, please let us know. And if you come to speak before the commission, please come up to the desk and we'll make sure you have a microphone to speak into. And with that, Sarah, did you have a motion?
Yeah, we need to add something onto the agenda. Since we have a full board, we should probably do elections. So I would move to add that to the agenda, if that's all right with the commission.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Okay, with that, we'll go to the chair. We have nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate you, Dr. Steinauer.
Any else? Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of Ernie as chair?
Aye. Double aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
I guess I'm chair again. Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Okay, vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Sarah as vice chair.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
You're opposed, Mike?
I am.
Okay, that motion carries with Commissioner Glowacki opposed and the chair in favor. Okay, so with that, we'll start the public meeting with public comment. Anything from the public on matters that aren't before the commission tonight?
I'll throw in real quick. For anyone that's interested and hasn't seen the agenda for the Board of Selectmen meeting tonight, Woodard and Curran is presenting the Myakonnet Pond watershed study that they've completed, kind of the reevaluation of that watershed and watershed area. It's pretty high up on the agenda early on, but if anyone lives in that area or is interested, I would definitely recommend checking that out. The report will be available online kind of after today. Will be available for everyone to review on the town website as well. But they'll be here and answering questions and doing some of those things, so that could definitely be good to participate in.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Okay, we'll go to the public hearing notices of intent, and the following are continued to August 20th. Lily Pond Realty Trust at 2729 and 31 North Liberty Street, and TAC 3 LLC at 26 Washington Street. Is there anybody here that wishes to comment on those that can't come back on the 20th? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Did you have public comment?
Yes. Okay, so we'll go to Gund at 3, 5, 7, 11, and 15 East Tristram Avenue.
Did David listen in? Did David listen in? This is the first or second?
This is the first.
First.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the applicant, Art Gasparo, Blackman Associates, along with Lee Wisher of the Woods Hole Group and Stan Humphreys of LEC. We also have Attorney Stephen Cohen here with us. We are before you tonight with a notice of intent application. This is the first hearing for a project located on the north shore of Nantucket. It encompasses several properties, so I'd like to just take a few minutes of your time to go over sort of the existing conditions as well as what is proposed. What we have here is I've included this same handout as a 8.5 by 11 in the initial application, but I thought that it might be helpful to also have it on the table as an 11 by 17, which is just a color aerial that depicts the project area and sort of covers. We can come back to the plan, but I think that the 11 by 17 may help to describe both the existing and proposed conditions. What we have is three existing structures, all pre-78 structures. that are located on several of these lots, and then we have a couple of vacant lots in between them. There are existing stone revetments on the easterlymost and westerlymost properties included with the project. There is a gap situation between them, of which across there is an existing order of conditions that permits dune guard fencing along there. There are remnants of the dune guard in place down there, and this project really started with the owners looking at whether, to go back and re-put in the dune guard under the permit that they have versus what could be done to address and further stabilize the coastal bank that we have there. For resource areas of the jurisdiction of the commission, we have a coastal bank, then we have coastal beach, and then land under the ocean. The work that is proposed is almost entirely within the resource areas themselves, except for the construction access points, which are shown as the red lines on the color photo. And really what we have is we've proposed 3 construction point accesses for the project area, which is one on each end and one in the middle. And then you'll see on the easterlymost end of the project, we've proposed an access with a sand ramp that would get us down onto the beach. And so that's included in of the 2 plans that are here in front of you, sheet 1 and 2. This sheet 1 shows that what we would do would be to construct a just by adding just pure pit sand, a ramp down over where that's been a previously used access, and that's how we would get machinery on the beach. All of the materials would be delivered to the top of the bank through the 3 accesses that are shown there. The project itself, for what we're proposing, has really several aspects. First and foremost is that on each of the existing stone revetments, the existing structures are starting to be compromised from end erosion on each of them and becoming destabilized. So what we're proposing is to extend the stone revetments, and then to add essentially a flank to protect the structures that are currently in place, and then to add essentially a 50-foot extension on each of them so that we don't, to hopefully avoid the same problem from happening. The intermediate section would then consist of a timber sand drift fence. There will be timber pile support, and then that would be backed by the sand-filled quar tubes, three rows that would be anchored in place. The profile and proposal is exactly what has been approved by the commission in the past to the properties a few hundred feet to the west of this property. We're proposing that the same conditions would apply to this project that apply to that project in terms of monitoring and nourishment, and really, it's the same template that we did. In other words, using the same size pilings, the same size timbers, the same kind of anchors, and the same fabric, quar fabric, and tubes. We're finding a fair amount of success with those projects without adverse impact, and we believe that we could do the same here. We see this as a very beneficial project in terms of that we're coming in with this and replacing that plastic dune guard, and so with a timber and a biodegradable product. The dune guard has been historically damaged during storm events, whereas we're finding, as we've been observing and monitoring the other projects of the same template, that we're not having damage to the timber fence the same way that you had the balling up, if you will, and the breaking of those this is one of the projects that had been supported by the I don't want to call them carbon fiber, but they're essentially a plastic reinforced post, and so those are what have been broken in the past, and again the plastic dune guard. So that
kind of important because of the fact that we basically have a pocket beach here. We are our own abutters in this case, and so any potential end effects of the proposed project are contained within. And so I think that is an important consideration here. The bank has been eroding in the past. The interior ends of the existing revetment have been eroding, and I think you saw that probably over here most dramatically during your site visit. And Art has turned the corner here because of the fact that waves get concentrated in the angles of the revetment. And so basically he's turned the corner and tapered it down as hard and fairly quickly so that we can protect those flanks and keep the revetment from being deteriorating again. The waves that are attacking this beach are locally generated, very similar to the conditions of the projects that are just to the east of here. In the report that I provided to the Commission, you see that the storms have been increasing as of April when I put that report together. We'd had actually had 25 storms that were equal to 25 knots or above. And so while the wave attack has been increasing over the years, the existing projects that are adjacent have been holding up very well. And so so then the question is, well, how much has the bank been contributing? And so we looked at three sources of data. We used the CZM shoreline change information. We used the Mass GIS photos from online, and then we used Google Earth. And so we got a range. It's not unexpected when you look at aerial photographs. And the range was from 1 foot per year, an average, to 1.8 feet per year. And that translates to a volume of between 1,500 cubic yards and 2,800 cubic yards per year. And so we chose 2,325 cubic yards per year, which is greater than the average, and helps make up for some of the uncertainty. But because of that uncertainty, we proposed 4 sources of sand, basically. The first source would be 2,300 cubic yards of dune nourishment, which would go right in front of the bags, the tubes, excuse me. We would have additional 1,800 cubic yards of sand, which would be on top of and cover the bags. And then the bags themselves, there's tubes, sorry, I keep saying bags, it's old habit, sorry, would contain 525 cubic yards of sand, and that, which is a total of 4,625 cubic yards of sand total that would be part of this project. So, and then the fourth source, of course, would be, if the tubes, if we lose, the dune nourishment, if we lose the cover and the bags deflate, the tubes deflate, then, the bank itself would be available for eroding and contribute sand to the system. So I think, we have a very conservative estimate of the sand that is we're going to put to mitigate for the erosion that's occurring out there. It's similar to the projects that our Commission has permitted before, and so we certainly think it's within the purview of the Commission to permit this if they so choose to. Stan?
Just briefly, Stan Humphreys for LEC. Since I had been involved with the permitting of the original dune guard fencing that was listed, I thought some little history would be important for the Commission to have. And that's actually a 5th sediment source, not too well quantified. But typically when a ridge and runnel system comes up into this property and builds the beach back up from the winter erosion, it's a fine-grained sand that's then wind-blown. And the dune guard was working for quite some time and really trapping and setting up more of a foredune, as Art called it earlier. And so I think with this project we do have the opportunity to nourish an area that may also accommodate wind-blown sand that comes in from other sources. And that's kind of the thought behind the annual nourishment based on what was lost in that previous year. rather than coming back with 2,300 cubic yards year after year after year. The system has a way of replenishing itself to some extent, and I do have to repeat that that's not quantified at this point, but it is a fairly unique process that is going on in this particular area, as I agree with Lee, more of a pocket beach condition or environment.
Ready for questions?
Yes.
Any questions from the commission?
I got a question. You have distances from the 3 houses to, well, not the ones in the front, not the ones on either side to the revetment, but say to the unprotected faces. Do you have those distances?
I could get that for you. I don't want to guess off the top of my head, or I could grab a scale. It's either way, but just very roughly, it's got to be a little over 100 feet, I would say. But again, we'd be happy to provide information for that.
And the other 2 lots are empty right
That's
now.
correct. Vacant.
Yeah.
Andy, did you mean the 2 protected houses?
Well, I'm saying you have the 2 houses that have the revetments, and obviously the distance from the house to the revetment is shorter, but protected, as opposed to the distance from the house to the unprotected corner of the revetment. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
The flanking,
You
you're
mean
asking
the
more
2
flanking?
protected houses?
Well, we've got the 2 on the sides, which want to extend and protect.
I think you're
But the distance
talking
from,
about
say, the
different
structure to here, the unprotected face, here,
Oh.
and here, and from here to here.
So we can
That's
add
fine.
those on. We can add those onto a sketch.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Maybe I was going to ask, historically, where exactly those revetments that are on, because you're proposing to extend these revetments, right, on the same,
Yeah, this dark black line right here is all that's proposed for extension.
and historically, how far is the revetment gone? I mean, is that all
Exact-
new?
No. This is existing condition. What's shown is sort of the rubble.
Right, so I understand it's existing. Historically, did it go that far? Was it ever? Did this ever go to here or here? I'm looking at.
No,
grand-
not that I'm
grand
aware of.
issues.
No, I not that I'm aware
So
of.
that's all new for this.
That's right. These two pieces here are new. Now there is, as Stan was just pointing, there's existing wood groins as well that are fairly significant. These are sort of the 8-foot high walls that were out there on the beach, and we would be removing all of that material. So there was protection in place in front of this flank.
But yeah, historically, you had groins that.
It was more like a bulkhead and a groin. This was a large bulkhead, and I could provide photos of that if you haven't. If you're not
There's
familiar.
actually, there are photos in Lee's report
Mhm.
that show those.
Yeah, I think you can see it in one of the.
So while there may not have been stone protection in this area, there was coastal engineering structures in front of it.
So you're putting that stone in basically because of the in-scour to sort of help.
Exactly, so that we don't keep having an undermining of the structure that's there.
Yeah.
And then you're putting the bags in front of that to basically,
Stop the same thing from happening.
yeah, okay.
And that's the design concept.
But it's the fact that there's a stone revetment there that's caused that planking and that exasperated in-scour and increased erosion.
But by filling the gap, if I may, and becoming our own abutter, then there's no area for that to happen again.
Art, do you know how old these revetments are? Roughly how old even?
I would say into 70s and 80s, I think.
Okay, so
But
40,
again,
50 years,
we
something like
can.
that?
I would say that I would put that as again rough, and I'd be happy to. I don't want to.
Late 80s on one part of it. I worked on it.
We will. Provide. We'd be happy to respond for the next meeting with information, just so we don't have too much speculation on this application.
So one of those was put in the late 80s, Dave?
It was, yes. Yeah, we worked on the return walls also, bulkheads. We built those, whalers on, I think it was 89.
I had a couple of questions about the erosion rate, and I do appreciate all the data you guys put in here, especially the storm evaluation. And I would imagine you're getting close to having the 2013 storm data. You didn't when this was submitted,
Well,
because it wasn't through April.
That's right, because
Yeah.
that's when the letter was, report was dated.
Mhm.
And so it's, the next time around, we probably will update it, yes.
Mhm. What was interesting to me, and I can see that you did, and you did a good job at describing why Google Earth was always not the best thing, but also looked at Mass GIS and Mass Coastal Zone. What was interesting is from 1846 to 2012, you had a minus 1.8 feet per year
Mhm.
erosion rate, and then the last, from 2005 to 2012, when you think that would go up, it actually went down to 1.2.
That's
I
correct.
think using those three transects, right, the same.
Well,
Or that's
actually,
just their data.
we didn't do 3 transects, we actually went along the entire
Mhm.
bluff and then looked at various transects along there, so.
Does that surprise you that it went down?
No, because of the fact bluffs usually fail catastrophically.
Mm-hmm.
And so depending upon where the storms come and where they're, it's something we see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically why we look at both short-term and long-term.
Right, right.
And I would agree that under the short term, under these conditions, I would have expected perhaps that we would have had more erosion. But, kind of the data is the data. So, I mean,
Well, 2 feet per year, let's say we take the higher number,
Yep.
1.8, and it's 100 feet to that building, that means that building's got about 50 years, we're guessing, maybe 90 feet, 40, 50 years?
well, that would be the math if it is 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or if it's 1.2, and I think it's, you could take either the higher or the lower. If you took half, split the difference and said
Yep.
1.5, you're still looking at probably 40 years at least.
That's probably a reasonable estimate.
So that's one of the things you usually, as far as giving us an idea of how, at the current erosion rate and the recent erosion rate both, taking both the most conservative or highest number in this case would be the most conservative.
It'll be interesting to see what this year, last winter was with all the north.
Right, that's why I
North
was
and northwest
asking Lee
winds
about
we've
that.
had.
I mean, there's lots of room to retreat to too, but I'm just trying to get an idea of, with what's been there for a while, how this erosion rate been.
So, well, go ahead.
One thing I think you might want to consider is that there's been the dune guard system that was in place for that period of time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be some impact on that erosion rate that happened then. And also, as we're looking at, so this distance here from the top of the bank back to this structure is about 130 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And is that, one thing I would remind the commission is that we do have the existing order for the plastic dune guard down
Sure.
there, and that this is also, the two ways that we're looking at this as not strictly as coastal engineering structure for this, but that it's a benefit compared to what you already have, what's already been permitted, and what could be then replaced. So, we could come in with something that we feel is gonna work better and be more in keeping with the current practices of the commission than sort of the old way, if you would, which is to go back to a plastic type of a solution.
Well, there's other options like doing a single row of zigzag fencing and nourishment that would not be a coastal engineering structure, that would probably work better than the dune guard, but not be quite as big a system as what you're proposing.
If I would say that I don't believe that a single row would be nearly as effective as the dune guard.
You think so?
And the reason being the open space of the fence. And that's the reason why that the tubes are included, is to have some level of sand retention to more closely mimic that natural rate of erosion. The dune guard is extremely effective in holding back the sand with just those little slits. The bigger problem has been the anchoring of that to the posts and the breaking of those posts under that other system. But in terms of sand retention, you don't have nearly the open area that you have now if we were to only do just the single row of the fence.
But this wouldn't have, you'd be making up for that lack of open area by the nourishment, which I think you did a good calculation on, but with 2 rows of sand drift fences, 3 things of core,
There's only a
nourishment.
single row.
Okay, single row of sand drift fencing.
Yes.
In addition to the 3 things of core, it's not like
Right.
that's more open space for gathering in fines than dune guard. You're not going to an area, you're not going to something that's even more capable of.
Well, I think one of the other things, if I may, that then the tubes provide is that it provides the stabilization for the rest of the bank, so that can all then be planted and hopefully maintain a stable coastal bank. Which just, if we were to just say, come in and replace, if the discussion is an alternative that eliminates the tubes and only has a drift fence in place, what we found with just the drift fence solution is that it's very difficult to stabilize your bank itself because of the washout of the sand that happens between when you have a 50% opening, essentially, of just having a picket fence. So that's where we see it's sort of a combination of the materials to do both things in order to stabilize the upper reaches of the bank so that we don't have the slumping, so that we have a base along the toe, if you will, with the tubes. And again, the tubes do have apertures throughout in the fabric that also then allow the sand to come back out. But I guess we may not come to a place. I just would like to know or be clear if there is information that I might be able to provide, specific to concerns that you may have.
Well, typically, and I think you've done that a little bit here, you do, 2 or 3 things we do when we're looking at things like this is we look at alternatives analysis for any kind of a coastal engineering structure, and you are proposing a coastal engineering structure. There's no doubt about that being this, especially with the extension of the revetment. That in itself is something that we typically do not permit on empty lots or for pre-78 homes or really much at all. I understand what you're doing and why you're trying to do it and that it's a gap lot, but one of the things that you do when you put in applications to show your thinking, what you verbally told us, is the alternatives analysis. Why didn't you do just nourishment, just dune guard, just a single row of fencing, just the single row of fencing plus nourishment, a drift fence made of wood? I mean, there's lots of other options, which you're very good about talking.
Moving structures.
Moving structures. I mean, there's several alternatives to what you proposed, and your thinking on why you've decided on what you've done is one of the things we evaluate.
We'll put something together for you for the review for the next meeting.
I'd like to make sure we get them all out on the table now and not have a situation when you come back later on and say some other alternative.
Right. In other words, that way we can go through them as a committee and say this is, as a commission, and say this is acceptable or not.
Do we have other specific ones in mind?
I think Art knows most of the ones that have been.
I'm just suggesting we need to be very specific in what we're asking for here, so we don't get into it.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'd rather ask once.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think I do have a sense of what I would lay out, and it would be from a nourishment alone to a stone the whole way.
Yeah, continue
With a
it.
couple of things in between, some gabions, because I've worked through those.
Sure.
In terms of how we came up with this solution. So I appreciate the comments and agree. And hopefully on the in-between, we meet, don't miss one that you say, what about that? But we'll put something together for you.
Art, are you seeing in-scour in this design in some of your other projects?
No.
Because I know, as you would expect, there's in-scour on the revetments because they're, so vertical and hard. But I just wondered if this bags and drift.
I haven't, and what we've done on those is, and each of those projects have been conditioned to leave a spot where we, during each maintenance activity, pile additional sand. And so that's exactly what we've done. And from my observation and the monitoring reports that we've been providing to you, we have yet to see really an adverse effect or impact at the ends of the structures. There is a place that is consistently for adding sand that is then lost. It does become quite sacrificial at that point because it's, again, the unconsolidated material that's quite easily mobilized when it is acted upon by the water and the forces.
But it's not getting back and eating the bank.
We're not getting failure from behind the tubes, where then I've yet to have to come back to you for any project and ask for any kind of a return.
For this color overlay, is this zigzag here then the dune guard that's in place, and the same thing you show there?
That's correct.
That's the dune guard.
That's correct.
So I think you've got, and where would that fall on this map? So I'm trying to figure out how much this project's going to scoot out onto the
Oh, it's in
beach.
front of this. We're going to be behind that
You're
row.
gonna be behind that.
This project essentially represents a bit of a retreat, if you will,
Yeah.
because that dune guard hadn't been maintained for the last season or two. And so
Was that just
So it
because?
goes further back.
the toes further back, and then this project would be located, if you would, just landward of the last dune guard installation, and all remnants of the old dune guard would be removed.
Was the lack of maintenance on the old dune guard just because there was multiple storms, or change in owners, or
No, same
random
owners,
money?
but it became, it started to become, well, what should we do?
Mhm.
It's getting broken, that was there over several years, and Stan may be able to add to that, where they were maintaining, and then now they've been talking, it's been almost a year that we've been working on this to try to get together and come up with a final solution to get before the commission. We were ready. The reason all this stuff was in April, we were ready to go then, but then we knew we had a pending change in the commission, and so that's the reason that things sort of got held up. They wanted to fix it, but didn't want to go back and then once again put in dune guard, when my recommendation and our recommendation was that there is essentially, the commission has come up with, for lack of a better term, a better mousetrap than dune guard, and that's what we're trying to hopefully show you, that what we're doing here is not to come in. I'll tell you right now, the owners very much want this all closed with rock,
Of course.
right? And I'm not here with that application, because I know that's not an application that's going to be well received from the commission. I'm here with we're here with the exact same template that you've approved in other locations that has been showing to be effective. Now, I understand every site is different. and
Houses are closer.
That doesn't make that's automatically then approvable here. But I hope that when we show the preponderance of evidence, if you will, in terms of past approvals, dune guard, situations that you have in terms of a gap in structures, the pre-78 structures, that ultimately this is a preferred solution to then coming back and just rebuilding a dune guard, which would be back what we would have to do otherwise or one of the alternatives, should the commission not want to approve this proposal.
Yeah, let's see, Art. I just wanted to be clear on one thing, and that's, often we require annual nourishment at the rate of loss, and you're proposing just to replenish what's lost. And the reason I got for that is because you've got, the multiple levels of sand, from the loose sand on top and in front of the bags themselves, and then as the final fallback, you've got the bank.
Right.
So if everything goes and say something catastrophic happens, then the bank will start eroding in this situation too. So
That's right.
That's correct. And so, I think you hit it right on the head, Mr. Chairman, in the fact that, if that bank was going to erode, and we know it erodes during storms, then the sacrificial dune would be taken out and it would be replaced. So the idea there is that, well, we know some years we have erosion, some years we don't have erosion. It's, Mother Nature's kind of fickle about when the storms come. So it was, let's maintain, a volume of sand there, which is in excess of what the bank would have contributed, and then we'll replace it on an as-needed basis.
Do we know the depth of the water? One of my concerns, actually, this is a rare concern for these kind of things, and is that this is a lot of sand, and it would erode in a storm right in front, and then shallow the area right in front. I don't think there's a lot of eelgrass there, but then you're going to have bigger waves because you've got a different
Well,
approach.
actually, those waves would break on the sand if you shallow it up. But I think your comment is very appropriate because of the fact that if we just kept putting 2,300 cubic yards of sand down, 2,300, year after year, and it doesn't get eroded, then there is a real possibility that, that all of a sudden there would be a whole lot of sand dumped into the system, suddenly. And so again, we know the bank erodes, slowly over a period of time, and that sand gets pulled into the nearshore system and then transported out, or either off onto a bar or back onto the beach. And so we're trying to mimic the natural system as much as possible.
How are the bars off here with two revetments on either side? Is it all going just straight to the jetties, or?
I don't really know. I'm not really familiar with the bars offshore there, so I'd have to plead my ignorance on that one. I apologize.
That's right.
That is the net direction, I think.
Yeah, that would be my guess. Is this picture, I'm not sure if you're comparing this to, this is one of the 2008, the setup that was there then?
The dune guards.
Two rows of dune guard and what looks like another row of something at the toe?
I think they put in some of the wooden slat.
Snow fencing?
Snow fencing.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically 2.5 rows of fencing. This is the, I'm just trying to figure out if that was what was previously permitted or not.
Do you know when those pictures were taken?
This is 2008 on
Yeah.
That does have.
4/22/2008. It's on page 57 of our packet. I'm just trying to see what it looks like on the far end and how the beach looks, what the toe looks like, how much vegetation's there. That's, you say you have a bioengineered slope at bottom left, so it looks like you have planted grass, but none of that stayed.
Right. And that got hit pretty hard. Previous to the dune guard, they had a practice of coming out with the snow fencing routinely. Just get destroyed there in the winter.
Yeah.
So Art, I think one thing you're going to have to justify to the commission, which is something we don't normally permit, is coastal engineering structure in vacant lots, because there's no structure there to protect. So I think you've got a couple of vacant lots here that you'll have to come in with the case of why you need to protect that as well.
With the hard structure.
Well, I guess quickly to that one comment, we certainly don't call this a hard structure. I mean, without a doubt.
Well, that's going to be revetment on those two parcels. I mean, this is
No,
going to be
no,
stones.
no. Let's be very, very clear here. And I can cut this back right here. That's only 5 feet. So no, there is no hard structure that's being proposed across the whole vacant lot. It's very much what we're considering to be the soft solution. And then that's only on this one, less than 25% of this piece, and that's as part of protecting the backside of this. Now we can revisit and look at that to see what we can do, but we're clearly not coming in with a hard structure across.
Are you proposing that section there as part of a maintenance plan to the existing?
That's right. That's
revetment
right.
that's there? There's a wooden return on that.
That's right. So we'd be
Now, so you're
replacing
just
all the wood,
taking that out and putting it back in with stone.
putting it in with stone.
So something that's hard there now, you're
That's right.
upgrading it,
That's right.
correct.
continuous with what's to the
So,
west.
and we could revise that to be within the limits of what was there. So it's not, I just think that it's very important to be clear that we're not coming in with new hard structure across the vacant lot. Now, the
It's
soft.
still a coastal
It's still a
Well,
coastal
I
engineering
don't
structure.
dispute that, but if we want to talk hard and soft, again, we're not coming back in with we're not proposing rock across the whole thing. And I think it's important that is an important distinction that we hope would be recognized in terms as well, that it is, that we're also, again, replacing a dune, there was dune guard that is permitted across those lots as well.
Okay, any other questions? Anything from the public on Tristan?
There's a letter from Emily in here.
Yeah, she just asked because they have their annual meeting, they're not able to be here, that to consider the letter they submitted. I know Art has a copy from the Land Council as well.
It's in our packet.
Yes.
Page
Yeah, page.
74. 74, yep.
Rather than, I see some of the calculations were on, like, how many times it blew 25 knots or whatever for such and such a time. Has anyone ever analyzed spots along the north shore of Nantucket as to, these are the ones that really hit us, you know? Because it seems to me, from the little that I know of the north shore, that there are only a few storms that really do damage, you know? Am I wrong about that? I mean, how many times, you know, that...
I can address that. Typically, in that analysis, we selected storms that were only impacting the shoreline. So, I mean, if it was blowing hard, and it was blowing offshore, we didn't select those. And so, what we have found early on is that there is a correlation between once you get over 25 knots, that you actually have some some storm surge, which allows the water to get to the base of the bank. Now, has that been quantified? As in, do we have profile data along the shore? No, we don't, because of the fact that data is just not typically available. And so it's a good question, and I'd love to have a project to be able to answer that, but unfortunately, it's just not. We don't have the shoreline response data to go along with that. So we use the wind data as a surrogate for that.
Anything else from the commission or the public? Okay. So
They're coming back in 2
yeah, you
weeks.
guys want to
We can continue until the 20th. We will provide supplemental information to try to address some of the comments and concerns we heard tonight, as well as to address the some of the same concerns that were raised by the Land Council in their letter.
Okay. So unless I hear an objection, we'll continue to the 20th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that takes us to Cressman on 8 Walnut Road.
Well, I'm getting this one out, packing this one away. We did this one last time, primarily because we were waiting for sign-off from Mass Natural Heritage, which we have since received, and they had no comments, so. I don't want to steal our thunder.
No, I'll be brief, unless you have additional questions, but this is a vacant lot, notice of intent for the construction of a single-family home, septic system, associated grading and driveway. We didn't request any waivers, except the possibility for temporary dewatering for separation to groundwater. We did receive sign-off from Natural Heritage. The limit of work is shown as the dashed dot line on the plan. We've preserved greater than 50% of the area between the 25 and 50. We're not proposing any work within the 25. I believe it's a project that meets the interests of the commission, and if you have any additional questions or concerns, I'd be happy to try to address those.
Any questions for Art?
Yeah, did we pretty much go through this?
I think we did, yeah.
We're just waiting for sign-off from Mass.
Yeah, so we don't need to repeat the hearing, do we?
No, anything from the public, anything come up? Okay, so Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
You ready to close, Art?
Yes, sir.
I have a motion to close the
So
hearing.
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, that was, Cianaba, Sheep Pond Road.
We're just waiting for.
Dave, this is one of the ones we opened last time, so you're not eligible to take action.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. Similar to the last project, this is a project that the Commission heard. We're waiting at the time on a DEP file number and also the final response with regard to the Wetland Protection Act from Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. This is a project located at the end of Head of Plains Road. Essentially, it's a Head of Plains Road address because there is access from Head of Plains Road. However, it's located at the very end of Sheep Pond Road, if you will. It's an application for a single-family residence with associated outbuildings. We have a bordering vegetated wetland that had been established through an RDA on a past application. The work, no waivers are required for the work. It is, again, grading, septic construction within the 100-foot buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. Portion of the site is in land subject to coastal storm flowage associated with Long Pond. And the limit of clearing that you see on the plan, which is the line with the large boxes here, was actually previously approved as part of a filing with Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. The project next door, Buttermilk Channel, was this project, and another lot further up were all holdings of one family, and due to avoid the anti-segmentation provisions of their regulations, they reviewed that all as an entire project originally. So we do already have approval for the clearing. It was an approval with conditions, staking of the clearing, recording of the notice, and so forth. That had all been done. What we were lacking was the comments under the Wetlands Protection Act, which we now do have. We do have also have our DEP file number. So I would venture to say we have all we need to proceed and close. We're happy to answer any questions that the Commission may have.
Are there any additional questions?
There's nothing you have to survey on site as far as endangered species or anything in relation?
No, it was strictly, we have to stake the limit of clearing. I have to provide a certification to them that it has been staked and fenced. And then that was the only requirement.
I don't think any plans were listed. It was Harriers.
That's right. It was a habitat specifically. That's right. Under the initial. Yep. Short-eared owl, harrier. Yep.
Diagonal, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did the commission view this? Have you guys looked at the site?
I don't think we went down.
I don't think we viewed that one. No.
Just curious.
It's unusual to have basically a restriction, fisheries and wildlife restriction like this, but he made it really clear that they had already gotten a letter from Mass Fish and Wildlife. But we normally don't close until we have that.
If there's no further questions, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close?
Yes.
So have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye?
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Cumberland Farms, 15 Orange Street.
Put your back.
I'm going to sneak out here and grab Sarah if I could.
And I just want a reminder
Me? Oh, a different
Sarah.
on this project, based on some of the letters and things that we've had, that the commission only regulates wetland issues. We do not regulate traffic or parking or noise, dust, things like that. So please, keep your comments to wetlands issues. Thank you very much.
This one here and then this one there. Thank you for the record. Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors and Sarah Alger, both representing Cumberland Farms, Inc., the leaseholder, if you will, for this particular piece of property, which is owned by the Rose family, or Grace Rose specifically. The application before you is before you because the land itself is a parcel of land that is subject to coastal storm flowage. There's a small portion of the front portion of the property at Orange Street that is land subject to coastal storm flowage. Hence the need for the notice of intent. The site is also located within a Mass DEP Zone 2, not Zone 2. So those criteria in themselves, the Zone 2 and or the filing of the notice of intent does trigger the Mass Stormwater standards because it's a commercial structure. So it's a filing that's been filed under for a full notice of intent and also It is subject to the Mass Stormwater standards.
But no wetlands.
No wetlands and/or buffer zones with regard to the subject site. There is wetlands obviously across Orange Street. They are over the regulated setback from the subject property. Now, we at this point do not have a DEP file number. DEP has asked some questions with regard to the stormwater management report, which has been submitted, which is a full report with regard to their standards, and then also talks about the hydrology and so forth. Prior to this meeting, I have met with Mark Kampf and his engineer, who is located along the westerly boundary line of the property. They had some concerns with regard to the location of our drainage system or on-site storage area, and have agreed to look at those and review the project further with him and his engineer. I did also meet with Julie Young, a butter across the street, who I know is here today, and spoke specifically about some, as Ernie had said, some of the internal workings of the site, which are not so much the purview of this board, but I did also have a conversation with her. The proposal itself is essentially a tear down of the existing facility and the construction of a new freestanding store, generally in the same location with regard to the setback from Orange Street. We will, however, though, eliminate all of the parking on William Street. So all of the William Street parking will be eliminated, and the parking would be concentrated on the westerly portion of the lot in a paved environment, paved parking area. Access to the store, main access to the store would be along the back side or along this side, along the parking lot side. There would still be a main entrance along Orange Street. There is a...
The parking lot entrance is on William Street, but the parking per se is not
correct
on the street.
The site itself, as you know, for the most part, the front side of the site is all that gravel compacted area that people are already parking on now. We would be expanding the site out into the treed area back here in an effort to gain additional parking along the back side of the property. Under the current proposal, we had essentially a grassed swale with the vegetated filter strips in it and an above ground, essentially raised, elevated detention basin with an overflow structure, which would ultimately release out to Orange Street in the event of a larger flood within the area on the backside of the detention basin.
So where would the swale be?
This is the filter strips, detention basin, overflow, and then a catch basin structure along the side of the building, which would ultimately then work its way into Orange Street. There is drainage within Orange Street, somewhat taxed. I mean, we are in contact with the DPW because I know there was an RFP out there for the Consu Springs drainage project. Where that has gone, we don't know, but I'm in contact right now with DPW. Specific concerns that Mr. Williams had with regard to the ponding of water along the backside of his property, where the grade right now does allow some of the flooding that occurs on the backside to come onto this property here. So those are issues that we'll deal with Mr. Williams for. And at the risk of being, I guess, too brief today, essentially that's the general proposal. Expect to be back on the 20th and file beforehand with answers from the state and specific modifications with regard to the Williams concerns along that adjacent property. And as I said, we still don't have the DEP file number at this point, and that's due to the fact of the questions that we have to answer with regard to the state. And that's
Any questions for Paul?
My biggest questions would be the stormwater report. Most of it's in here, but is all of it in here?
No, if you want a whole copy, I can give you a whole
That'd be
copy.
awesome, because to me, that's the biggest, is just to see. So I'm assuming, you already went through in your heads whether to do gravel or hard pack or other types, and paving is the only thing that can handle the traffic and the trucks. Is that?
well, yeah. From a maintenance standpoint, the other option, which I don't necessarily want to do, but we looked at was similar to what was done at Hatches, which was the impervious paving with essentially a drainage system underlaying.
Yeah, and that's...
There's maintenance issues with it, whether over the long term it functions. But we're looking at different options right now, which we'll try to maybe lessen the impact over here.
Right, right.
You know, we still have to, and ultimately then get into the drainage system on Orange Street.
This might be undersized, I mean, not through any fault of your own, but it's kind of undersized just for Orange Street.
Well, yeah, there's a whole separate, Orange Street has its own issues. I mean, all we can do is at least try to mitigate our increase. Really, the only really increase, for all practical purposes, this is a completely impervious area right now.
Right, no.
Really, what we're increasing as far as impervious is this back section of the parking lot. I mean, that front lot is basically hard packed, and really right now what it does is, quite honestly, it takes some of the drainage from William Street. The drainage that comes down William Street actually comes into the site.
Well, and even though it's hard pack, it is absorbing some of that, more than pavement would, so.
But yeah, I think what we did was how we split it up was that there's the hydrology component is a pretty good component of that. Most of it is the stormwater sign-off, check-off sheet, but the hydrology report is.
I kind of leafed through it, and if you throw me the rest of it,
I'll send the whole
look
thing.
through that.
We just had kind of the condensed version.
No, it was, most of it was all, I'm just making sure I do whatever due diligence I can do.
So Paul, you're increasing the building size?
Yes.
The footprint's a little bigger.
Yes.
1,700 to 3,700 feet.
Yes.
So that's quite,
Quite significant.
So and that'll all be, all the roof runoff will be drained into the infiltration system?
That's correct, yeah. The intent is to completely contain that and not have anything go overland.
Okay.
right now they don't have any dry wells or infiltration.
That's correct. Everything right now is
Everything runs right off the road.
Yep.
And there is no drainage currently in William Street. Pretty much the top of William Street works its way down.
But your only solution right now is that corner, is where you're putting stuff and rerouting some of it back?
No, it's actually, it's here to here, and then as an emergency overflow back out to Orange Street, because that's where the majority of it's now. The front section of the site
It's
is not
lower.
going anyway.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
So,
Do you have a depth of groundwater?
about 2.5 feet. 2.5 feet. You know, modeling at about 24 inches, groundwater probably at about, you know, I did 2 test pits in the gravel packed parking area, and I did one up in the backside over there, but it's shallow.
How much, are you excavating the entire lot and all the soil, or what's the?
No, I mean, this is mostly a fill situation over here.
Yeah.
Approximately about a foot of fill, ultimately where the parking lot will go.
Mhm.
And this, the first floor of the existing facility will be essentially where the first floor of the existing one is. It's still elevated above the new flood zone requirements, so that'll be okay. It'd be a slab. It's not going to be a crawl space foundation, obviously. It's going to be a slab on grade, but it would mimic the elevation that's out there right now. And the intent is to get a curve too on the William Street side, is to elevate somewhat on the floor and then have that be curved. So no one definitely can't park it. It'll be a curved.
Will it be
walkway
bollards and for
along
safety?
along that side, yeah.
Don't you have to add bollards for safety and stuff like that, as far as?
There's dimensional criteria.
Anything from the public on the Cumberland Farms? You come up and
Yeah,
introduce
come up,
yourself,
you have to
please.
give us your name. And
I'm Alice Roshaw. My daughter
I'm
Maria
Maria
Roshaw, a 7 William Street. We're co-owners of property. And I completely understand that you aren't a board that regulates traffic, et cetera, and all the other things in the ladder. But we've also come to realize that this does not have to appear before the planning board. We were just told. But we do have some questions that I do think are pertinent to this board. And hopefully we'll have some other occasion to address things such as traffic. But we are concerned, and we're asking for perhaps a continuance of this, because we're very concerned about the amount of pavement, the trees coming down, the flooding onto Williams, which is a problem with puddles. There's no safe place for children to walk. I have 2 grandchildren who live there, and their lives are, I don't know that certainly the parking to be removed from the side of Williams is a good thing, but they still have trucks pulling out of there, and we're concerned about puddles, and trees are coming down in the back, and there'll be more water. We have to ask for continuance so we could perhaps consult with some experts ourselves, professionals. I think the understanding was that it was going before the planning board, but evidently does not have to, which was kind of a surprise to many of the neighbors. And I think it's hard to believe that this is not a major commercial endeavor. So that's
Additionally, it seems, from what I'm hearing, is a lot of the talk about the water is stormwater, right? Isn't this all wetlands back here that's currently vegetation that would then be paved over?
Not according
It's
to
not,
them.
this is not wetlands?
That's what we were asking about. The only resource areas across the street over here,
Okay.
and it's subject to coastal storm flowage, which means high water during
Right.
storms.
But with the removal of all this vegetation and paving it over,
They have
Yeah.
they have to account for
it
that.
seemed like in the presentation that the engineer just made, that there were some drainage issues that really were to be decided upon a later date. And that doesn't seem like something, that seems to be something that we should have an opportunity to consult our own experts.
And that would probably be a good idea. I mean,
It
if you're
seems
very
so.
concerned, then to...
Yeah, I know that many of the other issues are not not the interest of this board, but seems to be a lot of drainage issues. It seemed like there were a lot of unanswered questions.
And the fact that the butter over there is actually retained an engineer.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what you
Yeah.
all mentioned, Paul, isn't that what you said?
Yes.
Right, I thought,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
That might be useful for them
Yeah.
to
I
talk
thought he
to.
was might be here.
Well, they knew that we were asking for a continuance of the 20th. So, and that the specific reasons are, and they knew that, so.
Did you get a copy of the full-blown report?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
actually did. I serve on a board similar to this at home, so I'm a little bit familiar with storm drains and things like that. I'm not an engineer, though, far from it. But anyway,
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else from the public on company?
My concerns.
Would you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, Julie Young. I have a property adjacent to this property, 117 Orange, just on the other side of Williams. My concern is this detention basin for mitigation of some of the runoff. And it's all massed at the back of the lot. And I don't know if the board has any input on maybe some constructive ideas about breaking this up so that it's all not massed in one part of the lot and maybe could be distributed to lessen the impact of all of this asphalt and the doubling of the size of this building. One possibility is where they have a walkway down Williams now, there's this area here that appears to be a place where there could be some vegetation. Just suggesting that the vegetation could be spread out in a lot in a more creative way than lumping it on the back of the lot. The parking isn't set in stone, to my knowledge. Is it, Paul?
Well, in that, whatever we come up with the drainage, it may be altered just to handle how we do with the drainage, yes.
I mean, I'm not familiar with this process of getting the parking approved before the HCC sees it, or at any rate, it seems like an awful lot of parking to me, and the parking could possibly be broken up with this the detention, the overflow. We're kind of looking at this as though it's been approved.
Right, well, we're evaluating their design based on whether they've got enough vegetation and drainage and systems that can filter out the junk on the pavement before it reaches any kind of a wetland or clogs up this drainage here. So our big concerns are, it's not a bad idea to have vegetation on this side, but that might be more of an aesthetics. I mean, we're reviewing it for wetland regs.
Really our only jurisdictional area here is the flood zone.
Right.
I mean, we're not in the buffer zone to any other
Yeah,
wetlands,
yeah.
so we're really
We're making
judging
sure
it on.
it doesn't change its ability to hold water. That's the number one
Correct.
thing that we have.
And I'm not
Criteria.
that this looks like plenty of space to hold the water that would run off of this parking lot. But I'm just saying that Williams Banks, the other way, this is actually going to have to tip it to get it into here. So it just seems like logical to move some of this vegetation around the parking lot. Paul, maybe I could ask you this. It doesn't show here where the entry into the parking lot is. Is it a 24-foot?
That's what's required under the planning board
Is
Under
that
the
gonna be
zoning
curved?
regulations.
Will that be curved?
No, that's an open area. It's actually more than 20 feet in order to accommodate larger trucks to come in and out of there. So it's just an open, that's an open paved area here, and all the parking will be striped.
Striped and not curved?
Correct.
And over here, this will be?
That's all curved. That's curved
It is curved.
along the entire side, yeah. From
And this-
the handicap space all the way down to orange is curved.
And this is walkway here?
Correct. And then so the intent here is to have parking here with an entry along the backside here. And they would still have an entrance here along the front, but this would be a handicap accessible walk, handicap accessible in two locations, at the rear and at the front.
And use for this space, could that possibly be vegetation?
Oh,
a
it's-
handicap
well,
walk, isn't it?
No, the handicap walk is here. This is just an expanded section of William Street is really what it is right now.
But it's your lot,
It's on the lot, correct.
so could it be vegetated?
Mr.
And it
Chairman.
would seem runoff from the building would
focus on-
naturally be absorbed there.
We need to focus on our jurisdiction, and this is the time for the public to be addressing questions to the commission, and if they want to have consultations with the applicant, they should really be doing that.
Okay, well, it might not hurt us to hear some of this either.
It's just, it's a very strange process that we're going through here. It's as
Sure
though this
is.
has been approved already. So
Well,
I don't know where
it
you're
bounces
putting it.
back and forth. I mean, depending on what the state has to say, the HDC, some of this will change, and if that happens, they'll come back to us with the altered plan.
I'm just trying to put in some input, that it would be nice to see some of this, which you do require, and I think is necessary and helpful, more creatively spread out on the lot. I've seen it done before. It's not an unusual thing to do.
Well, that's up to Paul, and that, again, I think Mike has a point that that would be something to sit down, and I think they've been very willing to
Yeah,
discuss
they
with the
are.
neighbors, which is a good thing.
Well, I've met with Julie before this meeting, actually.
Yeah.
So I've met with, like I said, both Mark Camp and his engineer, and I met with Julie too. So I know what Julie's concerns are, I know what Mark's concerns are. And I think their concerns are going to mimic your concerns, and so, I mean, that's, why we know we'll
And
be
that's
back
always
on
good
the
that
20th.
everyone's talking.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always a good
Thank you for
thing.
your time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Anything else from the public or the commission on Cumberland Farms?
Hi there. My name is Cynthia Carini. My husband Joe and I own 111 Orange. And I just wanted to point out where that is on here. Okay, this whole thing right here? Yes. So what I want to understand is when he's saying that it's to be determined, we can't be here on the 20th. So what I want to understand is when it is determined, when will we know how the proposed plans won't impact the flooding on our property? When will I know what that is that's going to be determined? And when will I be able to understand what that is? Because currently, whenever it rains, we're flooded. Our whole driveway is flooded. The whole backyard is flooded. The whole area between the house and the fence is flooded. So I just want to understand how the proposal is going to not make that worse. When will I be able to understand that?
Well, maybe, again, this might be something you can work out
Yeah.
with Paul.
So we're going to be, so the hearing on the 20th.
I can't be here.
Okay, so the filing deadline for information for the hearing on the 20th would be the Friday before, okay? So that's typically what was going to, we would file with the commission, you would, then anybody would call Jeff, and then that becomes public information at that point. That's typically how the process would work, then you'd have time to review it prior to that meeting.
So when you say it becomes public information, because I'm not familiar with this process
Yeah.
at all, where do I get it? When can I get it?
You would get it
You
to
can
the
get it
Concom, but
from our regular office.
Okay.
You can just contact me, and we can get whatever information people are looking for out to them. But
Okay.
it's due essentially by the end of business on Friday. So
And your last name, Jeff?
my last name is Carlson.
Okay.
I'm down at the Natural Resources Office for
Okay.
the town, and we're down at Jetty's Beach. And you can find us on the town website, or I can give everyone our phone number now. It's easier for everyone.
It never hurts to
Okay.
do that. We should probably do that at every
So,
meeting.
actually,
We can put it in the whiteboard behind us, yes.
So on that Friday, I can call and get what the plan is.
Yeah.
Correct.
That the water isn't going to be worse than it is now.
And that's part of
And
it.
then at that time, we'll be able to review it and discuss it again.
You can give me your email.
Yeah.
Sure.
And their stormwater management plan has to basically address that,
Right.
that
It
they are
should-
handling
it should
water.
be
And it
better.
should,
It
it should be better.
better
Yeah.
than what's there.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's
That's
the
the take-home
the thing to
message.
point out here is you've got an opportunity, you've got a situation that's not great out there now. We've got an opportunity where we're going to be working in the area, and there's maybe an opportunity to help the situation, number one, on Williams and on Orange Street. So we'll reach out to the DPW, we'll deal with what issues they have out there. So that's really, at the end of the day here, the entire site now is basically an impervious site with no drainage.
Yeah.
You know, it collects water from William Street. The situation you have here is you've got a big watershed above you here
Right.
that's bringing water this way.
Right.
It's not really bringing water this way. So the deal is here is to not, is, you know, the water that's here is we don't want to trap anything that's working that way. So that's a completely different watershed that we're dealing with up
I
here.
understand that, but everything I've heard and read talks about elevating. So it's, you know,
Yeah, yeah. But that's elevating and then pushing back
We're
this
making
way.
them keep their water
Yeah.
on there.
So-
That's the one thing that we review for this, is
Yeah.
with coastal storms, and that's why I asked for the whole dang
Mhm.
report, is to, not that I'm going to memorize it, but I'm going to look through it and look at the numbers and make sure they're keeping the water on their land.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we're
and I
looking
just want to understand
Oh, yeah, yeah.
how
no,
they're doing that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a really good way for abutters to do this also is, if they care to, is contact professionals on their own. They could have another engineer review what's submitted, and whether you can be here or not. The whole process is set up, and Jeff can explain that and outside of this forum, but you can have somebody look at it, they can submit comments, and all that stuff has to be considered when we decide.
Right, right.
Okay.
So you can get a
Yeah,
professional
we,
in.
certainly,
Okay.
just as a general comment, we definitely encourage written comment to come in, because it's something the commissioners can get in advance of the hearing.
Okay. And I wasn't home when the letter was sent. We were here, so I didn't actually hear about it until a couple days ago from a neighbor. So there was no time to do any preparation.
But you've got a couple of weeks.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
What you gave me.
Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Anything else from Cumberland Farms? Anything else from the commission? Okay, Paul, do you want to continue for 2 weeks?
Yes.
Unless I hear an objection, we'll continue this for 2 weeks. Okay, see you then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Sanford, 16, 22, and 26 Easton Street.
This is the bulkhead replacement.
David Haynes for the applicant. What we have here is there's an existing bulkhead that spans.
Yep.
It spans the three lots, it's 16, 22, and 26 Easton Street. And if you look at the notice of intent, there's some photographs in there that show the general condition of the bulkhead. It's a wooden bulkhead right along here, from here to here, 3 lots. It's a wooden bulkhead that is deteriorating and getting ready to fall in. And what we'd like is permission to replace or repair it by driving a new set of steel pilings in front of, just in front, as close to, but it's going to be out about a foot from the existing bulkhead, driven in, then anchored back on the existing ties that are there. There are some photographs that show the ties. They will be tied into the existing ties that come back, and then the annulus, or the area between the two bulkheads, will be filled with a concrete slurry, I have to check it. Will be filled appropriately. I can't remember if it's
Lists a
concrete.
concrete mixture here.
Yeah, does it say concrete?
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's what I had in my head.
That's the only way to do it safely, is to leave that space and fill it in.
Right. And it's going to be basically functioning in the same way as it does now. The way we propose to do it is to bring a barge up on the harbor side and drive the sheet pilings from the barge on in the harbor. We do have a letter from Marine Fisheries that's concerned about eelgrass beds in the area, and that the barge would be damaging to them.
It's going to sit on the bottom of the thing.
Yeah. It will sit at the bottom at low tide. Out here, there was a sailboat across 3.5 feet that was fine out there. According to the owner, the mean low water is probably right in here, about 20 to 30 feet out, and then it goes out, and we didn't see any evidence. The water was murky, but we looked at it for evidence of eelgrass and didn't see any eelgrass basically in this area. We do need to get you a little bit more information about what the depth of the barge will be, and whether it will be sitting on the bottom, and whether or not there is any eelgrass in there. I did not see any out about that far, but we need to compare it to what the barge will draw and make sure it isn't sitting on eelgrass.
Well, and the approach too, and the approach where the direction the barge is coming in.
Right.
Too.
But if it's floating
yeah, I mean,
above the eelgrass, and we're going to try to document the eelgrass.
Yeah.
Out there. We don't have a file number yet. There was some confusion because of the change in date and the plan was so it had to be fixed, and it's been fixed.
So they can drive that from the bank side?
I'm going to bring that up with the engineer
Yeah.
that designed it. That's the way they proposed
so much
it.
safe.
It's not much, it's very hard. This is the only way.
There's not a lot of access from either of these houses to get at
We did just do
concrete. Yeah.
the concrete. We repaired that last year.
concrete
We were
pad in
able
front
to
of the
come
dock.
in like that. I will speak to the engineer on this and see if we can come in from the land side, bring in the pile driver on the land side and the materials. It would be nice and easy to bring the barge in and pick it up and go down.
You need a silt fence too, in the water.
Right. So,
Any other questions?
we have more information to give you, so.
And if that, I mean, it's the whole length of this, right? So you need to know how the eelgrass looks like from, I'd say, from this box, and just your depths and how silty is. Some pretty nasty, mucky crap there.
Well, they were saying they were going to drive it and they weren't doing a wash system, so that would minimize the amount of silt that was in there. And I was speaking to the owner when he said it was when they swim out there, it's muddy and shelly.
It's just, there's a lot of silt there, so when she's vibrating.
Especially lawyer conference going on.
There's no dredging along the line of this bulkhead for obstructions or anything, nothing proposed for that?
No. So we will do
They
this.
dredge, they wouldn't need an Army Corps thing if they were dredging for maintenance, right?
No, they still
No,
do.
they'd have to have, unless they had a maintenance permit, but a lot of times on these projects, just that I've been involved with, there's a provision for clamshell obstructions along the face.
Yeah, but
So
they'd
before
have
they
to get an
drive
Army
sheeting,
Corps, yeah.
they'd have to have.
Right. Any work that takes place really below the water line
yeah.
would require, or on filled or flow tidelands requires Army Corps,
Yeah.
whether it's, unless, like Dave said, if you have a maintenance permit or a maintenance provision.
But I don't think
this is it.
Long-standing, yeah, you have to.
This one probably does not.
Yeah.
Have to get a Chapter 91 license.
You don't have that either?
We've got it for one of these bulkheads, we've got it for all of them.
Oh, my goodness, okay.
Maybe we should have our late August meeting right down there.
We might as well get some,
About
with some
sunset.
cohogs and a couple of.
They're having to essentially amend and modify an existing license to include it all as one structure.
Yeah.
But there are bits and pieces of it that are properly licensed. They're just,
Yeah. Is that going to delay you a lot? Because, well, I guess we just,
that's their problem.
that's their problem.
It's our problem.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound callous, but that's their
Yeah,
problem.
that might be a long problem.
They do require to actually even apply for Chapter 91. They do require an order of conditions to do so. So, in the order of process, this is the correct order for them to be
And if
applying.
anything comes about as part of that process, that we have to come back before you, obviously, we will come back.
The current dock is already permitted though, right?
Yes, the dock and the float are permitted, and one of the properties, I can't remember which one isn't.
Okay, if there's nothing else. Okay, so continue for 2 weeks or? Okay, so unless you have an objection, we'll continue this to the 20th. Okay, thanks, David. Okay, Breeskin, 34 Codfish Park Road.
Thank you. For the record, Paul Santos with Nantucket Surveyors. On behalf of the applicant, Rob Reskin, who is the current owner of 34 Codfish Park Road, which is located in Wisconsin and Codfish Park. The application before you is a notice of intent for work within a setback to essentially what is the edge of pavement and the Jersey barriers on the east side of Codfish Park Road, which is essentially the limit of a coastal dune on Codfish Park Road. The site is a small 4,900 square foot lot. Home has been there for some time, and the application, we were before you fairly recently with an upgrade of the septic system for the subject property. There was actually 3 individual leach pits, one that serviced a kitchen, one that serviced a bathroom in the front of the structure, and then another that serviced a bathroom and shower. Those have been removed, and there's a new upgraded system has been constructed on the site. The application before you is a notice of intent for the elevating and placement of a foundation system underneath the existing, it's essentially a pier system for the existing structure. And within that, picking up and moving, they are curing some of the zoning imperfections on the site, and then also doing some proposed expansion to the existing structure. The coastal dune itself is on this side of the plan here along Codfish Park Road. This is the 25-foot setback here, 50-foot setback, and then the entire lot is within the 100-foot setback to that coastal dune. The site is separated from the dune by Codfish Park Road, which is the paved section of roadway. The application, this plan here kind of depicts, I think, best for what we're trying to do. The red being the structure, what the structure would look like after completion of the project. The darker black lines are what's out there now. This existing shed that's located here, essentially on the property line and within the 25 and the 50-foot setback, will be completely removed from the site. A new shed will be constructed in the back side, smaller. This is 144 square feet. We're proposing a 120 square foot standard shed along the back side of the property. And then the building itself is being reconstructed and expanded, as you see in the red. The project will require waivers, and I've asked for those waivers under 2 provisions. One, that the premises, that the project would not adversely impact the interests identified in the bylaw, and there are no reasonable conditions or alternatives that would allow the project to proceed in compliance with the regulations. And then also the provision 103F3B, which specifically talks about the resource area being separated from the site by a public improvement, which is Codfish Park Road within the subject site. At the end of the day, I think so all the improvements will be removed outside the 25-foot setback. Between the 25 and the 50, I think there is an increase of about 20 square feet of structure within the 25 to 50. And then from the 50 to the 100 is just the regulated area. All the work would be entailed within that area there. The site is completely, basically developed. It's what's not structure is lawn and or developed area. So be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So at the end of the day here, that the 25 is clear, and then there is a slight increase in the 25 to 50, and then the rest of it is all between the 50 and the 100-foot setback. And the existing septic system, the upgraded septic system already is in place, and that has a separate order of conditions for the septic. I didn't amend that order. This is a new order specific to this application. We do have our DEP file number. It is outside of any mapped national heritage, endangered plant, endangered species, and the site actually is elevated to above the flood zone for the particular area.
This is the shed that's going away right here.
That's the shed that's going. That's right. That shed is going to be. That's right. That shed's going away. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the property at one point there was two properties. There was this property, and then there was another piece across the street that did have a cottage and a house on it that was part of. Is now part of the dune and the beach system, but it was actually two lots at one time separated by Codfish Park Road.
Any questions for Paul? Anything from the public on Reskin on Codfish Park Road?
Al Lucy, 36 Codfish Park Road.
Come up to the front, please.
I'm just curious. I'd just like to get a copy of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine having any objections.
That's nice to hear. You can come back every week.
Well, if there's no questions or comments, we have a file number on this one.
It's all the same.
So, Jeff, do we have everything we need to close this?
Yes.
Paul, you ready to close?
Yes.
Have a motion to close.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you.
I need my plan back. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Askew, 21A Pilgrim Road.
Good afternoon, Mark Ritz from Site Design, representing the applicants at 21 Pilgrim. This is a property that the Commission reviewed back in, I believe, February for an RDA to confirm the presence of a wetland across the street, across Pilgrim Road, and to allow some brush cutting. Now you have before you an application for the development of the small 5,000 square foot lot with a single-family residence and pool and a couple other amenities. The structure is entirely outside of the 50, partially within the 100. The only work that will occur inside the 50 is driveway, some landscaping on the Pilgrim Road side, and utility connections to existing utilities in the road. The applicant is proposing to put up silt fence along the Pilgrim Road side of the property to prevent any siltation into the wetland across the street, and also to temporarily erect silt fence on the opposite side of Pilgrim while any utility connections are being excavated and made so that there's no siltation into the wetland during those activities. That's pretty much it.
No waivers?
No waivers on this one.
Okay.
Groundwater's pretty low because that wetland across the street is down maybe 15 or 16 feet down slope. It's in a bit of a hole.
Any questions for Mark? Anything from the public on Askew on Pilgrim Road? Okay, well, that was an easy one, Mark. You ready to close?
I am.
Jeff, you have everything we need to close.
Yes.
I have a motion to close.
Move to close.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to amended orders of conditions. Cooney at 65 Winoma Way.
Elizabeth Maury for Christopher L. Maury, Design and Construction Agent for the applicants, Gretchen and Gordon Cooney. We are proposing an amendment to the order of conditions that was permitted in May 14th. And the proposal is a 576 square foot garage, which is located outside the 50-foot buffer zone to a coastal dune and vegetated wetland. We're also proposing the shell driveway to access the garage, which is off the existing shell driveway. We're proposing to remove the existing shell driveway that runs behind the existing dwelling. And we're replacing the parking area with a blue stone patio, and also rotating the shed slightly to line up with that proposed patio area. All of the proposed structures are outside the 50, and no waivers are required.
Confused about this 50. What is this blue? I mean, it looks like this is half in the 50 and half out. Or
The blue is the contours.
oh, just
Purple
okay.
is
So
the buffer zone.
so this just this buffer zone here is not okay.
Yeah, these are the crates.
Okay. I wouldn't do number of
This is what's on this plan. I don't know.
water all over the place. It's just like,
I should have done a different color.
Green.
Sorry.
No, that's right. I was just so confused because I thought
No,
maybe
not
it was
this
different.
one, house.
Just do it in yellow next time, then no one will be able to see
And
it.
we'll be extending the silt fence. There's already a silt fence because they're working on the project currently.
So there's nothing new in the 0 to 25.
Everything's outside the 50.
Everything that's
Everything except part of the
The
bluestone
bluestone
patio,
patio,
but
yeah,
it's
the
within
patio.
the existing parking
And that's a
area.
pretty.
And the first
Yes.
time you were going to move that shed anyway and relocate it, that really hasn't changed much, or has it?
No, the shed was relocated a couple of years ago to be outside the 50. We're just rotating it so it lines up with the proposed patio and the existing dwelling. Right now it's at a skewed angle with the driveway.
Same location, just a little.
Yeah, just actually, yeah,
Yeah.
corner.
Okay.
Turning into place.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay. So Jeff, do you have everything you need? Do you have a recommendation?
I recommend that this can be closed and issued as an amended order.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
You'll notice some whole permits tonight.
I've actually got a blue pen. I'm very excited.
I always have.
Okay, public meeting, request for determination, 1 North Beach Street. At 1 North Beach Street, amazingly enough.
This is David's present side. Nice. We got you already. Oh, you guys are quick.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mess around, man. You can pick up steam.
Jeff wants to go to the selectmen's meeting, so they got to get done.
You guys want to get done?
David Haynes for the applicant. This is a request for determination for a small addition and a deck on the back of an existing building on the corner of North Beach and Easton Street. It's within land subject to coastal storm flowage and outside the buffer zone from all other resource areas. There's an isolated wetland purportedly on the other side of the road, and I won't even talk about that. The buffer zone may come onto our property, but it doesn't come into our.
The 100-foot buffer zone falls short. It does not.
Right. The buffer zone doesn't, whether that's, I'm not arguing whether that's a wetland or not. I'm staying out of that argument. But back in here, we're putting an addition on and a deck for the existing HVAC unit back here. The deck will be on posts and raised above the flood elevation. The small addition is over a landscape area and walkway that will be on blocks similar to, will be a block construction similar to the existing building for a foundation, and raised up in there. There will be no regrading done, no change of the vegetation. The walkway will be maybe reconfigured slightly as a brick walkway, and grass. Things will be stabilized with soil, loam and seed. Excuse me.
I will say, in our field visit, all of those areas are all currently developed in brick walkways or landscaping materials, or a lot of them already have utilities within. So, just my 2 cents.
Any questions? Where's my friend here that's not opposed to the project from Cotton? I'd like to have some support.
Wrong project.
So Jeff, your opinion that this,
Yeah, I would recommend just a positive 2 to confirm the resource areas,
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
and then a negative 2 for the work.
Including the negative 2.
do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, minor mods, Desert Island LLC, 13 Delaney Road, Lot 7.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I asked that that be held for 2 weeks.
Unless I hear objection, we'll hold this over for 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Art. Okay, 5 and 9 Madawi Creek Road.
Good afternoon, Brian Madden from LEC Environmental, representing the applicant. An order of conditions was issued last September for a proposed driveway with utilities that involved a wetland crossing over a narrow ditch. We're here before you for modification to the driveway layout beyond the crossing. The proposed rerouted path is in red. The previously approved is in blue. Basically, the intent is to avoid a large black oak tree. I included a photo of what that looks like. When it was all surveyed out, the former path was cutting right through it, so we did have the opportunity to sneak right around it. No modifications within the 25-foot, so no additional waivers. And another element that is being abandoned is there was previously a sewer force main going within the roadway that was tied into another lot that has been released. There was a certificate of compliance issued on that project, and that property was sold to the land bank. So the only utilities being installed are typical telephone, electric cable. And that basically summarizes the modifications.
So it was within the 25 to 50 to the other wetland to the right. Now it's further from that, closer to the one on the left.
Yeah, it's kind of split in the difference. It is moving away from the one to the south. It's straddling between the 25 and 50.
Okay.
What it is doing is it's minimizing impacts to the sampling grassland habitat too.
Good. Sounds like a lot of good stuff, actually.
Yeah.
So Jeff, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, I recommend this could be approved as a minor modification.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
It's like the nicest minor modification.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
We're dodging trees. and
We're
taking
dodging
sewer force
trees.
mains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Finding flowers.
Okay, certificates of compliance. Buttermilk Channel LLC, 9 Head of the Plains Road.
Sure. This is one, we actually talked about the neighboring lot earlier today with Cianama.
Oh,
the
yeah,
Sheep
yeah.
Pond Road one. This was the neighboring lot for the single-family home construction. With our inspection and review, everything was built with compliance. There's actually very little within our jurisdiction. It's just a little sliver of the house and stuff. So I would recommend the issuance of that certificate with ongoing conditions.
Does the Mass Heritage letter go with that, though? the CR for,
So moved.
Yeah, that's recorded against the title.
yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Lowry and Martin at 323 Pulpus Road.
This is a reissue, Mr. Chairman. This is one that they were doing some work on the property, and I've had it closed out, but someone lost the original and don't have a recordable copy, so they're simply asking for a reissue. So we took a look at the site again. Everything's still in compliance. There were no ongoing conditions before, so I recommend that we could reissue that thing.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Orders of conditions.
Sure. So the first one that was on top there was the amended order. I just included it this time. I found myself with more time.
That's the one we already signed off on?
So this next one, this to the floor, for Crestman, is one of the ones that you're not eligible for. This one is Cianaba, so just hang out anymore.
Okay, so we've done P.
Yeah, we just issued
That
that
was the
signed.
amended order.
Okay, so Bert Cressman then.
Yep, I do have a mistake I'd like to change. I forgot on this one. The waiver was requested for the footings being within
2 feet of
2
ground.
feet to groundwater,
Mhm.
and I forgot to include that. So, other than that, I didn't have any other conditions. It seemed pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We continued this to the,
Nope, Crestman was closed.
it's closed, okay.
So, I can write that.
Okay, so do I have a motion to issue as amended?
So moved.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay. Cianaba, we closed.
Yes.
That's Sheep Pond Road.
And this is the one that didn't require any waivers or anything fancy. I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay. You're welcome. And there's no waivers.
Correct. The only condition I had was for the pool,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty typical. No waivers were required.
Okay, move to issue as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, 70, let's see, Dionis Realty Trust at 73 Lip Point Road.
Am I David here? Not on this one either. They finished this one last time.
So David should sign that one, and he should. For the next one.
This one is, no.
Just keep passing that one.
Don't look at it.
All right, this was one for last time. This was the retreat project.
Okay.
Again, everything was moving outside of our jurisdiction, and they were regrading. So
That's great.
there's no. All I had was construction materials outside the 50, so it was pretty straightforward. We were just waiting for natural heritage on that.
Mm-hmm. Move to issue as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, Ruskin at 34 Codfish Park Road.
All right, this one we closed tonight down in Coppish Park for that kind of rebuild and relocation, and the demo of the shed, and then the rebuilding of the smaller shed.
So David skipped on this one?
Yeah, David skipped on that one.
Yep. He's in on this one. In
Yep.
on this one.
This was just opened and closed tonight.
Yep.
Seemed pretty straightforward.
It's nice when the road is in between the resource areas. Those things make it a little easier.
Yeah.
This is the one that's in the buffer zone to the Jersey barrier.
Correct. It's one of those. It's one of those things that's interesting because it kind of forms a man-made coastal dune, which in the regulations is kind of interesting because it doesn't really talk about how that works. But the form and function above it is still.
What they're doing is not changing anything.
No.
Move to issue is drafted, if everyone's okay with it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, the Heath family, LLC, sounds like a bunch of fun. Oh, Henry Askew at 21A Pilgrim Road.
That was the one that we just had Mark Ritz present. That was the non-waiver project. Again, I couldn't really think of any conditions for this. This one, just to be clear, there is a pool located on the locust for this one, but it's outside an area of our jurisdiction, so we don't really have regulatory authority over them.
Oh, interesting. That one in the far right corner, is that of our?
Yeah, it's outside of the 100, so the 100
Such a
runs
little
kind
tiny
of through
lot.
the building. So I try not to lump in things all of a sudden permit a pool in an area that we don't have jurisdiction over, because then it's shifting around or something crazy happening. Not that it would, but.
So,
Everybody's okay with this? We have a motion to issue as drafted.
so
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Okay, we got through those. Okay, do we need to discuss anything else, or I guess everything pretty much showed up?
Yeah, we
just continued.
everything was either continued or we issued on everything that was closed. Not to jump ahead, but we'll have minutes for you next time.
Okay, other business, no minutes. Okay, reports. Do you have a CPC representative? Somebody volunteered.
Yeah, I did. I met with Mel Rich and he said, well, you really want to do this, right? I said,
No.
I said, that's a report from Jeff. I said, actually, that's not true. I did it reluctantly because everybody looked at me. I said, I'm going to serve to the best of my ability. So we have new projects coming out. There's a couple that I'm probably going to buy into, and we're meeting the 19th, and there's a public forum, I think, first. Is that what it's called? I can't remember.
Usually.
Anyway, that's all I know, but I've contacted Neville.
I like
Good job.
Can't recall responsible for bullying someone into something. So remember, it's only for a year. All of these things are always flexible, or if it's just really not working out and someone else is showing interest.
No, I want to do it. It's just I'm new and I'm still learning about the Concom, and this is a whole new set of stuff.
You'll be great.
Yeah.
I love it. Great.
Anyway, thank you, yeah, for paying me. Because you were the guys that appointed me.
Guilt works wonders.
Yeah, guilt does work wonders. It's the first time.
Yeah, we had a meeting, and Andrew Vorst asked me at the end of the meeting to ask us if we would revisit the idea of transferring our properties over to the land bank. And judging by the non-comment, I'm not sure. I guess we have a few. He was mentioning the one out in
the woods.
I didn't realize. Do we own some like Gwen Guyard's land? I thought that was already land bank.
There's a little tiny piece
Yeah.
in there that is, but
Hidden.
it's not a piece that's really accessible.
Yeah, and then he had mentioned Warren's Landing property.
Yeah.
Wood property.
Wood property.
So I would say to that too. I've done a little research because I also got that bug planted in my ear after
He
you
told
did,
me.
Is we do have the ability, if it's something that we want to visit, that as part of the transfer over, have the ability to reserve rights or, essentially restrict uses or put restrictions on
I
there.
think we
So
should put a CR on it. Of some kind.
Well, and I think we should have a public hearing over it too. It should be in our agenda. because
I think it was more, my understanding was if we would entertain even him coming in to present the options for what we have and then getting some input and then making a decision.
It might be nice to hear from the land bank as well.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think that's all he was looking, was to have the opportunity to talk about that, show you the list of all the properties for what's
Sure.
there.
I think we should
Present
sell them
them.
all and have a big party, that's what I would do.
So
Yeah, we build a hospital or something.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Pay us back $4 million in back pay.
Okay, well, interesting. Anything else, Andy? Nope. Okay, mosquito control.
They're getting ready to do a couple of presentations, the VDCI. We just had our mosquito control legislation approved at the State House, so we now finally are a mosquito control district. We haven't actually had a meeting, but we're working on education, and I think on the 23rd I'll probably host at the field station the folks that are doing mosquito testing to give a public presentation, and they might do one a couple of days. No, they're doing one for Walwinet before that. But our next meeting's on the 20th. I'll be able to tell you for sure what time on the 23rd. But the good thing is we now finally, after 35 years, our own mosquito control committee, though in effect that does allow anything that the town does as far as mosquito control to have in effect a type of waiver from the CONCOM regulations. So it's not necessarily a great thing for us, but it's a great thing for mosquito control. But
So they can ditch and everything without...
None, they'd still have to, but they, they waive certain wetland regulations, so they're exempt for small things, like BTI. Right now, all they're doing is putting larvicide on. They're not doing any ditching or, but it does change some of their regulations. What it allows to is the state has not been testing our mosquitoes. We have to have them pay to have them tested. So this forces the state to actually treat us like every other county in the Commonwealth and test our mosquitoes for Tripoli and West Nile. So there's a whole, I could do a whole presentation no one needs to hear, but that's the plan right now, and they're doing a lot of treatment on land that they're allowed to access with BTI, just with the larvicide.
Okay. Any other committee type meetings? Okay. Commissioners' comments.
I have a question about the end of Nantucket Road, and it's not the lovely one. I'm sure you're getting hundreds of phone calls. It's actually the lot to the right has completely cleared their lot almost completely of vegetation. We just did the clean team there this last weekend, and there's just this big thing of rubble and dirt to the right.
Yes, that was one
That didn't look like something we'd approved. So.
No, that was work that was done. Part of it was under one of the house move emergencies that we did this winter. And they need to come back. I actually spoke with them today about that, about coming back to permit some of those things, because the site's kind of in shambles.
It is in shambles, and they cut down a lot of vegetation that would be protecting them from further erosion. So I was
well, their house was right up to the edge for a lot of it, so they'll be back soon.
Okay. No, when I saw that, I'm like, I don't remember approving that, so 'cause it looks really bad.
I speak to the Lacanes pretty regularly.
I bet. They're
So.
not the racist. They yelled at us too, but that's all right. We still cleaned up their trash.
Right.
But no, it was shocking. I was like, I think we would have remembered if we said that. So.
No, it's kind of a hodgepodge.
Yeah. Okay. I promised I'd ask.
Nope.
Anything else?
For David, this is usually if we see something just crazy around, this is our chance to ask, publicly ask Jeff these kind of things.
So Jeff, I've just had a couple of people suggest this to me, which I think is a good idea, that maybe not every week, but periodically we have a review of our enforcement orders and progress. And
I'll actually get to that in my report, but
or
I'll do it now.
Okay.
So we actually just got ready for those of you who haven't met her yet. I think David's the only one that has. This past Tuesday we had our office person start. So her name is Joanne. Last name's Capone. For those who know her, so she'll be there. And one of the projects that she's working on is pulling out even some of the old ones that predate my tenure here that were issued in some of the other enforcement actions that are there. And we're hoping in the next month to have kind of a complete list of all the ones that were never closed out or there wasn't action or things that are outstanding with actual inspection reports that go with them that are current. So we know what's going on, because there are a bunch that are floating around and some that are older than, like I said, my term here. So I want to try to get all those at least cleaned up or figure out where they are and do inspections on all of those, and then get a full report back to you guys, and then kind of add it as a regular item in for what we have and kind of keep it going and kind of keep a list that's there for everyone to stay on top of. It's just something it's a little different than a regular filing process because there's not always something that's filed and exchanged and it's kept a little differently. So we're making that change. So hopefully by the first meeting in September that will all be complete for you guys to see. The ones that are obviously more ongoing will be back in front. So
Well, I'm glad to hear you've got a assistant now. That's great.
it's nice. That's why you got all full permits to sign tonight because she was able to get all of those ready today. So instead of waiting for me to do it. So I do have a couple other things too. I was going to say that.
Yeah,
I do have a brief update on. I got the plans today, so I'll send you guys out a copy of this digitally too. I'll email it to you to go over. But this is the plan from the Hummock Pond wetland area with the approved, with the replacement areas, and then the square footage.
This is the new stuff Brian did for the...
Right, so this is from Brian's flagging. That's there. Sorry, it's a little tough. So you can see the existing replacement area is the red area, so it's the red hashed area. And then the approved that we had done originally was the blue line. And then they have the original wetland line. That was just the record one. So from their calculations that are there, it looks like the approved proposed wetland area was about 2,700 square feet. And then from the new flagging that Brian completed and we kind of verified, they're actually at about 3,200 square feet. So I think where, as far as area and earthwork go, I think my personal recommendation is that we're in a good place with that.
Okay.
I think as far as, and from our field viewing, dealing with plantings and reseeding and putting in plugs and putting in some shrubs, obviously has a bit to go, but I was more concerned that we were still going to have, we're going to be 500 square feet short and have to start doing it. So that was finally some good news on this project. That
Did you guys go Monday for the field meeting?
Yep, we were there on Monday. So I think for those who were there, people would tend to agree that, especially on what would be the western side, kind of the long edge, there definitely needs to be some work with plants and stuff when we get into kind of our planting window here. And also some work that needs to take place up at the culvert area to clean up that sedimentation issue. So I think with that being said, if it's all right with you guys, for the next meeting, I think I'll probably prepare, like I did before, kind of some written recommendations and timeline for stuff to go forward, and we'll get you guys to hopefully review it, amend it if necessary, and then set that forth as the path for them to go down, now that we know that earthwork seems to be fairly complete at this point. So to get that back.
Looking from Brian's report, it seemed like some of the wetland was more based on distance to groundwater than surface.
Plants or stuff like that, yeah.
But most of this area does have brush in it, so wetland plants are growing in.
Yeah, I think some of that area, especially on that western side where it's a shame he left, but I know when I had talked to him, he was doing it, some of the areas he was doing his soils work in was just barren, didn't have any. Usually for determining for vegetation, obviously it's like a lot of basal area studies where you're looking at for herbaceous plants kind of within that square foot that's there, and then shrubs have a different, and trees obviously have a different cover that's there. That in that immediate area, there wasn't anything significant, or really some stuff may have been too hard to key out coming up, that he was basing it more on the soil condition and the hydrology that was there. And I think it made some sense, and I think given the overall scope of his report, I think and kind of reviewing the line as well, I think he's pretty on point with most of his findings. So
I'm just trying to remember this winter if I ever saw that area actually holding water.
I don't remember ever seeing it hold
Way back.
Yeah.
I've seen it hold water.
Yeah, I think that
Well,
But
the
not
whole
recently.
recently, I mean, all the way out to here, or just in the back here?
All that, I've seen it, the whole area hold water. Like the first year it was done. Yeah, the first year it was done, it seemed to me it held well. That first summer it looked pretty good.
Well, I think I think they lost a lot of that banking.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I think maybe that's part of the problem too.
I think some of it is to remember too is not all of it is going to show visible holding of surface water. I mean, some of it and vegetated wetlands are a little bit the same way. That groundwater is going to come up and influence and create the hydric soil, but it may not have surface water on top. So I guess from my aspect, I was more concerned that the soils and the soil conditions were fitting and appropriate than whether it was holding surface water, because I think that when the plants come in, if the soils are appropriate, it'll begin to function. Obviously, it takes time to develop proper hydric soils and kind of the regime that's there. But I think if you have a good base and have that hydrologic connection, I think you can make it work. And I'm encouraged to see that a lot of the areas have come back with kind of a monoculture soft brush. But I think with some plugs, I think plugs are a really great idea. I think some shrubs are a really good idea, and some spots, I think some seeding. But I think we'll try to put that on paper for everyone to kind of see and kick around and get
I think
there.
something we need to write into any wetland replication is sort of a long-term review, that may require further efforts if things don't.
Like replugging with a certain loss of plugs and things like that.
Or other work that might be necessary or whatever.
And we usually do in a lot of revegetated areas have an up to 90% success rate. So for replication, you would think it'd be at least that.
Yep. All right, and one more thing, and I promise I'll stop. I was speaking with our council, this one with Mr. Pucci, the other day, and he would like to, either before or at the start of your next meeting, would like to set up, we can either do it before the next meeting at like 3:30, just to have a short executive session to discuss the Sconset Blufftown Nantucket appeal, and kind of where we are, what their plan is. I mean, he's our legal representation there. He just wants to spend a half hour and sit down and answer questions and talk to you guys and kind of explain where we are in the process and what's going on. But that obviously is something that we don't call many executive sessions, but it's something for us that current litigation and pending litigation is something that's covered by executive session and is kind of the appropriate forum for that. So, are there any thoughts? Do you guys want to do it at 3:30 or? Sure. Does that work for everybody?
That works for me.
Yeah, it works.
I mean, that's a little tough. It'll be right before the regular meeting, so we'll just do it. We'll probably do it in here and just keep people out, or we'll go into the other conference room.
Can you remind us?
Yep, I'll send out an email reminder, but I wanted to check to see how I want to do it, because he's going to be here for a different matter that night, and we were discussing it, and he really wanted to get here and have a chance to talk to you guys all.
That's enough time, 3:30.
If we need more, we can certainly set up more. We can go through. I think he just wants to give kind of everyone a preliminary update for where we are and what's going on, since there's been so many questions about what is going on. So maybe to address things or answer some questions. So I'll schedule that for 3:30 on that same day.
Sounds good.
Because I do have to post that, so just post this executive session. That's it for me.
Okay, guess we're ready to adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries unanimously. Almost 6.
Pretty close. Hopefully they haven't started yet.
Have it.
It's all your, good to see you again.